Sarah Mitchell woke up to the sound of wind hitting her small wooden cabin. She pulled the old blanket closer to her body and looked at the clock on the wall. It was 6 in the morning, and she could already feel the cold air coming through the cracks in the walls. Her breath made small white clouds in the freezing air inside her home. She got out of bed slowly, her feet touching the cold wooden floor. Sarah was 34 years old, but she felt much older. Life in the Colorado mountains was hard, especially when you had very little money. She walked to the small kitchen and looked in the old refrigerator. There were 3 eggs, some bread, and a small piece of cheese. This had to last her for the next 2 days. Sarah made herself a cup of coffee with the cheap instant coffee she bought from the store in town. The hot drink warmed her hands as she held the cup. She sat at her small kitchen table and looked out the window at the snow-covered mountains. They were beautiful, but they also made her feel very alone. Her dog, Rusty, came over and put his head on her leg. He was getting old, just like everything else in her life. His brown and white fur was starting to turn gray around his face. Sarah pet his head gently. "Good morning, boy," she said softly. Rusty was her only friend up here in the mountains. Sarah had not always lived this way. 3 years ago, she had been married and lived in Denver. She had a nice house, a good job, and money in the bank. But then her husband left her for another woman. He took half of everything they owned, and Sarah lost her job soon after. The stress of the divorce made her sick, and she could not work for months. When her grandmother died and left her the old mountain cabin, Sarah decided to move there. She thought it would be a good place to start over and heal her broken heart. But life in the mountains was much harder than she had expected. The cabin was old and needed many repairs. The roof leaked when it rained, and the walls did not keep the cold out very well. Sarah had to be very careful with money. She got a small check every month from her grandmother's pension, but it was only $400. She also did small jobs for the few neighbors who lived nearby. Sometimes she helped them with their animals or cleaned their houses. But there was not much work, and winter made everything harder. Most days, Sarah felt very lonely. The nearest neighbor lived 2 miles away, and the small town was 15 miles down the mountain. Her old truck used a lot of gas, so she only went to town when she really needed to. She had no internet at the cabin, and her old phone did not work well up there. Sarah tried to grow her own food in the summer. She had a small garden behind the cabin where she grew tomatoes, beans, and potatoes. She also had some apple trees that gave her fruit in the fall, but winter was always hard. She had to buy food from the store, and everything cost so much money. The worst part was heating the cabin. She had an old wood stove, but buying wood was expensive. Sarah spent many cold nights wearing all her clothes to bed and using every blanket she had. Sometimes she would go to bed early just to stay warm under the covers. On very cold nights, Rusty would sleep on the bed with her. His warm body helped keep her from freezing. Sarah was grateful for her old dog. He never judged her for being poor or alone. He was always happy to see her, and always ready to give her love when she felt sad. Sarah often thought about her old life in Denver. She missed having friends to talk to and places to go. She missed having enough money to buy what she needed without worrying. But she also knew she could not go back. She had no job waiting for her there, and she could not afford to rent an apartment in the city. Some days were harder than others. When the snow was very deep, Sarah could not drive down the mountain at all. She would be stuck in the cabin for days with just Rusty for company. She would read old books she found in the cabin, or listen to the radio when the signal was strong enough. Sarah tried to stay positive, but it was not easy. She was young and smart, but she felt trapped by her situation. She had no money to move somewhere else or start a new life. Every month was a struggle to pay for food, gas, and the few bills she had. The loneliness was the hardest part. Sarah would sometimes go for days without talking to another person except for Rusty. She would talk to her dog like he could understand every word she said. Maybe he did understand in his own way. Winter was always the worst time. The days were short and dark, and the cold made everything difficult. Sarah would count the days until spring when life would get a little easier. She could grow food again and maybe find more work helping her neighbors. But for now, Sarah just tried to get through each day. She would make her coffee, pet Rusty, and look out at the beautiful mountains that were both her prison and her home. She did not know that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine, all because of 50 cents and a tiny donkey that nobody else wanted. Sarah woke up on a cold October morning in 2019 with a plan. She had been thinking about getting a goat for weeks now. A goat would give her milk, and maybe she could make cheese to eat and sell. She had saved $20 from her small jobs, and today was the monthly animal sale in the valley town. She put on her warmest clothes and boots. The truck was covered in frost, and she had to scrape the ice off the windows before she could drive. Rusty jumped into the passenger seat, excited to go somewhere new. Sarah started the old truck and hoped it would make it down the mountain without breaking down. The drive took almost an hour on the winding mountain roads. Sarah drove slowly because the roads were icy in some places. She passed by other mountain homes where smoke came out of chimneys. Most of these houses looked much nicer than her cabin. Their owners probably had more money than she did. When Sarah got to the town, she could see many trucks and trailers parked near the animal sale building. Farmers and ranchers had come from all over the area to buy and sell animals. Sarah felt nervous as she parked her old truck next to the fancy new trucks that other people drove. Inside the sale building, Sarah saw hundreds of people sitting on wooden benches. Most of them looked like they had plenty of money. The men wore clean cowboy hats and boots that were not worn out. The women had nice coats and jewelry. Sarah looked down at her old jacket and jeans with holes in them. She felt like she did not belong there. The sale started with expensive cattle. Sarah watched as people bid thousands of dollars for single cows. She held her $20 bill in her hand and felt foolish for thinking she could buy anything here. But she stayed and hoped that maybe there would be something cheap later. Hours passed, and Sarah watched as horses, sheep, and pigs were sold for more money than she had seen in months. She was getting ready to leave when she heard the man running the sale say something about goats. Sarah sat up straight and listened carefully. But the goats were still too expensive for her. Even the smallest goat cost more than $50. Sarah felt disappointed and was about to get up and leave when she heard people in the crowd start to laugh. The sale worker was bringing out a tiny donkey that was so small it looked like a baby, but Sarah could tell it was not a baby because of the way it moved. The little donkey was very thin and looked sick. Its fur was rough and dirty, and it could barely walk straight. "Here we have a miniature donkey," the salesman said, but he did not sound excited about it. "This little fellow is looking for a new home. Let's start the bidding at $50. Nobody raised their hand. The man waited and then said, "How about $25? Still nobody moved. People were talking and laughing about the tiny donkey. Sarah heard someone say, "That thing is more like a big dog than a donkey." The salesman looked frustrated. "Okay, let's try $10. Surely someone wants this little guy for $10. But again, nobody raised their hand. Some people were taking pictures with their phones and showing their friends how small and funny-looking the donkey was. Sarah felt sorry for the little animal. It looked scared and confused by all the noise and people staring at it. She knew what it felt like to be alone and unwanted. The donkey reminded her of herself in some ways. "All right, folks," the salesman said with a sigh. "How about $5? $5 for this donkey." No hands went up. $2? Still nothing. People were starting to get up and leave because the sale was almost over. The man running the sale looked like he wanted to finish and go home. $1 for this donkey. Come on, somebody give me $1. Sarah looked around, but nobody seemed interested at all. Then the man said something that changed Sarah's life forever. 50 cents, he said. "Will somebody please give me 50 cents for this poor little donkey? I can't send him back where he came from." Sarah felt her heart beating fast. She looked at the $20 in her hand. She had come here to buy a goat, but all the goats cost too much money. This little donkey only cost 50 cents. She could afford 50 cents. Before she could change her mind, Sarah raised her hand high in the air. The room got quiet and everyone looked at her. She felt her face turn red as hundreds of people stared at the woman who wanted to buy the tiny, sick donkey for 50 cents. "We have 50 cents, the salesman said happily. "Going once, going twice, sold to the lady in the blue jacket." Sarah walked down to the front of the room to pay for her new donkey. Her legs felt shaky, and she wondered if she had just made a big mistake. What would she do with a donkey? She did not know anything about taking care of donkeys. When she got closer to the little animal, she could see that he was even smaller than she had thought. He was about the size of a large dog, but he had the long ears and face of a donkey. His eyes looked sad and tired, but when he saw Sarah, he seemed to stand up a little straighter. Sarah gave the man her 50 cents and signed a paper that said the donkey was now hers. Some people were still watching and talking about her purchase. She heard someone say, "That woman just wasted 50 cents on a donkey that will probably die in a week." But Sarah did not care what they said. She gently put a rope around the little donkey's neck and led him out to her truck. She was surprised by how light he was when she lifted him into the back of the truck. Rusty sniffed the new arrival and seemed to accept him right away. As Sarah drove back up the mountain, she kept looking in her mirror at the tiny donkey in the back of her truck. She still did not know what she was going to do with him, but something told her that bringing him home was the right thing to do. She had no idea that this 50-cent purchase would change her life in ways she could never imagine. The little donkey that nobody else wanted was about to become the most important thing that ever happened to her. Sarah carried the tiny donkey into her cabin and set him down gently on an old blanket near the wood stove. The little animal was shivering from the cold mountain air. She looked at him carefully in the light and saw that he was even more special than she had first thought. The donkey was perfectly formed, but everything about him was miniature. His legs were short but strong, and his hooves were no bigger than quarters. His ears were long like a regular donkey, but they looked huge on his tiny head. Sarah decided to call him Charlie, because he reminded her of a Charlie she had known as a child who was small but very smart. Charlie seemed to understand that he was safe now. He stopped shivering and looked around the cabin with bright, intelligent eyes. Sarah gave him some water in a bowl, and he drank it carefully. She did not have any special food for donkeys, so she gave him some of her bread and apples. Charlie ate slowly and seemed to enjoy every bite. Rusty was very curious about the new visitor. The old dog walked around Charlie and sniffed him from head to tail. Charlie did not seem afraid of Rusty at all. In fact, he seemed to enjoy having another animal to be friends with. Within an hour, Charlie and Rusty were lying next to each other by the warm stove. Over the next few days, Sarah learned that Charlie was not like any animal she had ever known. He was incredibly smart and seemed to understand everything she said to him. When she talked to him, Charlie would tilt his little head and listen carefully. His eyes always looked right at her face, like he was trying to understand every word. Sarah made a small bed for Charlie in the corner of the cabin using old blankets and hay she found in the barn behind the house. But Charlie did not want to sleep there. Instead, he chose to sleep right next to Sarah's bed. Every morning she would wake up to find Charlie standing by her bedside, waiting patiently for her to get up. The first amazing thing Charlie did was learn his name in just 2 days. When Sarah called Charlie, he would immediately come to her even if he was outside. Sarah had never seen an animal learn so quickly. Even Rusty had taken weeks to learn his name when he was a puppy. By the end of the first week, Charlie had learned to open the cabin door by pushing down on the handle with his nose. Sarah was shocked when she came back from getting firewood and found Charlie waiting for her outside. The door was wide open, but Charlie had not run away. He had just wanted to come outside to meet her. Charlie seemed to read Sarah's moods in a way that was almost human. On days when she felt sad or worried about money, Charlie would come and stand close to her. He would gently push his small head against her hand until she petted him. Somehow, having Charlie near made Sarah feel less alone and scared about her future. The tiny donkey also showed amazing problem-solving skills. Sarah kept her chicken feed in a metal can with a tight lid so rats could not get into it. One day she watched through the window as Charlie figured out how to knock the can over, roll it with his nose until the lid came loose, and then eat the grain inside. It took him less than 10 minutes to solve this puzzle. Sarah started teaching Charlie simple commands like sit, stay, and come. To her surprise, he learned each command after just a few tries. Soon Charlie knew more than 20 different commands. He could sit like a dog, lie down, turn in circles, and even shake hands by lifting his tiny hoof. Word about Charlie began to spread to Sarah's few neighbors. Mrs. Johnson, who lived 2 miles down the mountain, came to visit and could not believe what she saw. Charlie performed all his tricks for her and even seemed to show off a little bit. Mrs. Johnson told everyone she knew about the amazing tiny donkey who lived with Sarah. More neighbors started coming to see Charlie. He seemed to love having visitors and would run to greet anyone who came to the cabin. Charlie never bit or kicked like some donkeys do. Instead, he was gentle and friendly with everyone he met. Children especially loved him because he was just the right size for them to pet and hug. Sarah noticed that Charlie seemed to understand when she was worried about money or food. On those days, he would stay extra close to her and do funny things to make her laugh. Sometimes he would steal her hat and run around the yard with it, or he would push his food bowl to her with his nose as if offering to share his dinner with her. The bond between Sarah and Charlie grew stronger every day. She found herself talking to him about everything: her fears, her dreams, her memories of her old life. Charlie would listen to every word, his big eyes focused on her face. Sometimes Sarah felt like Charlie understood her better than most people ever had. Charlie also proved to be very helpful around the cabin. He learned to carry small tools in a bag that Sarah tied to his back. When she was working outside, Charlie would bring her things she needed without being asked. He seemed to know what she was trying to do and wanted to help her. One day, Sarah was feeling very sad because she was down to her last few dollars and did not know how she would buy food for the next week. She sat on her front steps and cried quietly. Charlie came over and put his small head in her lap. Then he did something he had never done before. He made a soft, gentle sound that was almost like singing. The sound was so sweet and comforting that Sarah stopped crying and looked down at her tiny friend. Charlie looked back at her with eyes that seemed to say, "Everything will be okay. We will figure this out together." In that moment, Sarah felt a peace she had not felt in years. As winter approached, Sarah realized that Charlie had brought something into her life that she had lost: hope. Every morning when she woke up and saw Charlie waiting beside her bed, she felt grateful to be alive. The tiny donkey who had cost her 50 cents had given her something worth more than all the money in the world. But Sarah had no idea that Charlie was about to bring her much more than just happiness and friendship. Her 50-cent investment was about to change her entire life in ways she could never have imagined. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been a veterinarian for 15 years, but she had never heard stories like the ones people were telling her about a tiny donkey living up in the mountains. At first, she thought people were exaggerating. Animals were smart, but not as smart as these stories made Charlie sound. Dr. Rodriguez worked at the Colorado State University. She studied animal genetics and behavior. People kept calling her office and telling her about Sarah's donkey who could do amazing things. Finally, her curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to drive up the mountain to see this Charlie for herself. It was early 2020 when Dr. Rodriguez made the long drive up to Sarah's cabin. The roads were icy, and her car slipped a few times on the steep mountain paths. She began to wonder if this trip was worth it. Maybe people were just lonely up in the mountains and were imagining things about this donkey. When Dr. Rodriguez arrived at the small cabin, she was surprised by how poor everything looked. The cabin needed paint, and the fence around the yard was falling down in places. She wondered how anyone could live in such conditions, especially during the harsh mountain winters. Sarah came out to meet her, followed by an old border collie, and the smallest donkey Dr. Rodriguez had ever seen. Charlie was even tinier than she had expected. He stood no taller than her knee, but he carried himself with confidence. His eyes were bright and alert, and he seemed very interested in the new visitor. Dr. Rodriguez introduced herself to Sarah and explained that she had heard amazing stories about Charlie. Sarah seemed embarrassed and said she hoped the doctor had not wasted her time coming all the way up the mountain, but Dr. Rodriguez was already fascinated by what she saw. Charlie walked right up to Dr. Rodriguez and gently touched her hand with his nose. Then he sat down like a dog without Sarah giving him any command. Dr. Rodriguez was surprised. She had worked with many donkeys, and none of them had ever sat down like that or shown such immediate friendliness to a stranger. Sarah began to show Dr. Rodriguez some of Charlie's abilities. She asked Charlie to bring her a specific tool from a box of tools, and Charlie went right to the box, looked through it, and brought back exactly what Sarah had asked for. Dr. Rodriguez could hardly believe what she was seeing. Next, Sarah set up a simple puzzle for Charlie. She put a treat inside a box that could only be opened by moving 3 different levers in the right order. Dr. Rodriguez watched in amazement as Charlie studied the box for a moment, then systematically moved each lever until the box opened. It took him less than 2 minutes to figure it out. Dr. Rodriguez asked Sarah if she could examine Charlie more closely. As a veterinarian, she wanted to check his health, but she was also curious about his genetics. Sarah agreed, and Dr. Rodriguez began her examination. The first thing Dr. Rodriguez noticed was that Charlie was perfectly healthy despite his small size. His heart was strong, his breathing was normal, and his muscles were well developed. But as she examined him more carefully, she began to notice some unusual things. Charlie's bone structure was different from normal donkeys. His bones were smaller but denser, and his skull had a unique shape. Dr. Rodriguez had studied animal genetics for years. and she began to suspect that Charlie might have a very rare genetic condition. With Sarah's permission, Dr. Rodriguez took some blood samples from Charlie to analyze back at her laboratory. Charlie stood perfectly still during the procedure, as if he understood that it was important. Most animals needed to be held down for blood draws, but Charlie seemed to cooperate willingly. Dr. Rodriguez spent the rest of the day with Sarah and Charlie, documenting everything she observed. She took videos of Charlie performing various tasks and solving problems. She also measured his body proportions and took detailed photographs. One of the most remarkable things Dr. Rodriguez observed was Charlie's communication skills. He seemed to understand complex sentences, not just simple commands. When Sarah said, "Charlie, can you show Dr. Rodriguez how you open the gate?" Charlie went to the gate, used his nose to lift the latch, opened the gate, walked through it, then closed it behind him. Dr. Rodriguez had never seen anything like this in her career. She had worked with dolphins, elephants, and primates, all animals known for their intelligence. But Charlie seemed to demonstrate a level of understanding that was extraordinary for a donkey. Back at her laboratory, Dr. Rodriguez began analyzing Charlie's blood samples. What she found amazed her even more than his behavior had. Charlie had a genetic mutation that she had never seen before. This mutation affected not only his size but also appeared to influence his brain development. Dr. Rodriguez discovered that Charlie had a form of dwarfism that was extremely rare in donkeys. But more importantly, this genetic condition seemed to be linked to enhanced cognitive abilities. Charlie's brain was proportionally larger than a normal donkey's brain, and it showed patterns similar to those found in highly intelligent animals. Dr. Rodriguez contacted genetic researchers around the world to share her findings. Everyone agreed that Charlie was scientifically unique. There were no other recorded cases of donkeys with this exact genetic combination. Charlie was not just a pet. He was a living miracle that could help scientists understand more about animal intelligence and genetics. Dr. Rodriguez called Sarah with the news. She explained that Charlie was incredibly valuable to the scientific community. His genetics could help researchers understand how intelligence develops in animals, and might even lead to breakthroughs in treating genetic disorders in humans. Sarah was overwhelmed by this information. She had known Charlie was special, but she had never imagined he was scientifically important. Dr. Rodriguez explained that Charlie's story needed to be shared with the world, not just because he was amazing, but because he could help advance medical research. Dr. Rodriguez asked Sarah if she would be willing to work with her research team to study Charlie more. She promised that Charlie would never be taken away from Sarah or hurt in any way. All they wanted was to learn from him and document his abilities. Sarah agreed, but she was worried about what this might mean for her quiet life with Charlie. She had no idea that Dr. Rodriguez's discovery was about to turn her world completely upside down. The tiny donkey who had cost her 50 cents was about to become famous around the world. The poor mountain woman who had bought an unwanted donkey was about to discover that she owned one of the most genetically unique animals on Earth. Charlie was not just her beloved pet, he was a scientific treasure that would soon change both of their lives forever. Dr. Rodriguez shared her research findings with her colleagues at the university, and within days, word about Charlie began to spread through the scientific community. At first, Sarah did not realize what was happening. She was still living her quiet life in the mountains, feeding Charlie and Rusty, and trying to stay warm as winter approached. The first sign that something was changing came when Dr. Rodriguez called Sarah on her old phone. The doctor sounded excited and a little worried at the same time. She told Sarah that other scientists were very interested in Charlie's story, and that some reporters had started asking questions about the intelligent tiny donkey. Sarah did not understand what this meant at first. She asked Dr. Rodriguez if this was a bad thing, and the doctor explained that it could be very good for both Sarah and Charlie, but it would also mean that their private life would become much less private. People from around the world would want to know about Charlie. 2 days later, Sarah heard the sound of cars coming up her mountain road. This was unusual because hardly anyone ever visited her, especially not multiple cars at once. She looked out her window and saw 3 vehicles parked in front of her cabin. People with cameras and notebooks were getting out of the cars. Sarah felt scared and confused. She had no idea who these people were or what they wanted. Charlie seemed to sense her worry and stayed close to her side as she walked outside to meet the visitors. Rusty barked at the strangers, but Charlie remained calm and curious. The first person to approach Sarah introduced herself as a reporter from the Denver newspaper. She had heard about Charlie from Dr. Rodriguez and wanted to write a story about the amazing tiny donkey. Behind her were a photographer and a reporter from a local television station. Sarah felt overwhelmed. She was not used to talking to strangers, especially people with cameras. She was also embarrassed about how poor her cabin looked, and worried that people would judge her for her simple mountain life. But the reporters seemed very interested in Charlie and were kind to Sarah. The television reporter asked Sarah to tell Charlie's story from the beginning. As Sarah talked about buying Charlie for 50 cents at the animal sale, the reporters took notes and recorded everything she said. The photographer took many pictures of Sarah, Charlie, and the cabin. Charlie seemed to enjoy all the attention. When the reporters asked to see some of his tricks, Charlie performed beautifully. He opened gates, solved puzzles, and responded to complex commands. The reporters were amazed, just like everyone else who met Charlie. That evening, Sarah watched herself on the local television news. It felt strange to see her face on TV and hear her own voice telling Charlie's story. The news anchor called Charlie the most intelligent donkey in the world and said his story was truly remarkable. Sarah thought that would be the end of it, but she was wrong. The next morning, her phone started ringing early. More reporters wanted to talk to her. Someone from a national television network had seen the local news story and wanted to do a bigger story about Charlie. By the end of the week, Sarah's quiet mountain life had completely changed. Cars and trucks came up her road every day. Reporters, photographers, and camera crews crowded around her small cabin. Some days there were so many people that Sarah could barely get outside to take care of Charlie and Rusty. Dr. Rodriguez came back to help Sarah deal with all the attention. She explained that Charlie's story had been shared on social media and that millions of people around the world had seen videos of the tiny donkey. The story was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Someone had posted a video of Charlie solving puzzles on the internet, and it had been watched by over 5 million people in just 3 days. People were sharing the video with friends and family, and everyone wanted to know more about the amazing tiny donkey and the woman who had bought him for 50 cents. Sarah started getting phone calls from places she had never heard of. Reporters from other countries wanted to interview her. Television shows wanted her and Charlie to visit their studios. Sarah felt completely overwhelmed by all the attention. The most surprising thing was how people reacted to Sarah's story. Many people were touched by the fact that she had bought Charlie when no one else wanted him. They admired her for taking care of him, even though she had very little money. Some people started sending her letters and emails with kind words and encouragement, but not all the attention was easy to handle. Some reporters asked hard questions about Sarah's past and why she lived alone in the mountains. Photographers tried to take pictures of her when she did not want them to. People started showing up at her cabin without calling first, hoping to see Charlie. Sarah had to learn how to talk to reporters and how to protect her privacy while still sharing Charlie's amazing story. Dr. Rodriguez helped her understand that Charlie's story was important for science and that sharing it could help other animals and even humans. The breakthrough moment came when a major television network decided to do a special program about Charlie. They called it the Einstein of Donkeys and planned to spend a whole hour telling his story. The network sent a famous reporter and a big camera crew to spend several days with Sarah and Charlie. This television special was watched by 20 million people across the country. After it aired, Sarah's phone did not stop ringing for days. Newspapers around the world picked up the story. Charlie became famous in countries Sarah had never even heard of. People started creating social media pages dedicated to Charlie. His videos were shared millions of times. Someone even made a song about the tiny donkey who nobody wanted but became famous around the world. Children drew pictures of Charlie and sent them to Sarah. Sarah realized that her life would never be the same again. She was no longer just a poor woman living alone in the mountains. She had become the owner of the world's most famous donkey. People recognized her when she went to town, and everyone wanted to talk to her about Charlie. But even with all the craziness, Sarah was grateful for what was happening. Charlie was bringing joy to millions of people around the world. His story gave hope to people who felt unwanted or unlucky, just like Sarah had felt before Charlie came into her life. Sarah had no idea that this was just the beginning. The media attention was about to bring opportunities that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. Her 50-cent donkey was about to make her very wealthy, but more importantly, Charlie was about to help make the world a better place. After Charlie became famous on television and the internet, Sarah's phone never stopped ringing. But now the calls were different from the reporter calls she had been getting. These new callers wanted to offer her money, more money than Sarah had ever dreamed of having. The first big offer came from a pharmaceutical company in California. A man in an expensive suit drove all the way up to Sarah's mountain cabin in a black car that looked very out of place on the dirt road. He introduced himself as Mr. Peterson from Genetic Solutions International. Mr. Peterson explained that his company wanted to study Charlie's unique genetics to help develop new medicines for humans. He said that Charlie's genetic mutation might hold the key to treating brain disorders and learning disabilities in children. The research could help millions of people around the world. Sarah listened carefully as Mr. Peterson explained what they wanted to do. They would study Charlie's blood and genetics, but they promised Charlie would never be hurt or taken away from Sarah. All the research would be done with samples, not experiments on Charlie himself. Then Mr. Peterson said something that made Sarah's heart almost stop beating. His company was willing to pay her $500,000 for the right to study Charlie's genetics. Sarah had to ask him to repeat the number because she could not believe what she had heard. $500,000 was more money than Sarah had earned in her entire life. It was enough money to fix her cabin, buy a new truck, and live comfortably for many years. But Sarah was not sure if she should accept the offer. She loved Charlie and did not want anything bad to happen to him. Mr. Peterson gave Sarah his business card and told her to think about the offer. He said she could have lawyers review the contract to make sure Charlie would be protected. He also said that Sarah would own all the rights to Charlie's story and could make money from books, movies, or anything else that used Charlie's name. After Mr. Peterson left, Sarah sat on her front steps with Charlie and tried to understand what was happening to her life. A few months ago, she had been worried about buying food and staying warm. Now someone was offering her $500,000 for her 50-cent donkey, but the offers did not stop there. 2 days later, a woman from Hollywood called Sarah. She worked for a movie company and wanted to make a film about Charlie's story. She said they would pay Sarah for the rights to make the movie, and they wanted Charlie to play himself in the film. The movie company was willing to pay Sarah $200,000 plus a percentage of the money the movie made in theaters. They also wanted to hire Charlie for other movies and television commercials. They said Charlie could earn thousands of dollars every time he appeared on screen. Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. People wanted to pay her huge amounts of money just because she owned Charlie. She felt like she was living in a dream that might end at any moment. More offers kept coming every day. A book publisher wanted Sarah to write a book about her life with Charlie. They offered her a contract worth $300,000, plus money from every book that was sold. They said Charlie's story would inspire people around the world. A toy company wanted to make stuffed animals that looked like Charlie. They offered Sarah money for every toy that was sold. A greeting card company wanted to use Charlie's picture on cards and calendars. Even a cereal company called and asked if Charlie could be on their cereal boxes. Sarah felt confused and overwhelmed by all these offers. She had never had to make decisions about this much money before. She was afraid of making a mistake that might hurt Charlie or cause problems later. Dr. Rodriguez came to visit Sarah and help her understand all the offers. She brought a lawyer friend who specialized in contracts with animal owners. The lawyer explained each offer carefully and told Sarah which ones were good deals and which ones she should avoid. The lawyer also explained that Sarah could negotiate better terms for some of the contracts. Since Charlie was so famous and unique, Sarah had the power to demand better payments and stronger protections for Charlie's welfare. One of the most interesting offers came from a technology company. A young businessman named David Chen had made millions of dollars creating computer apps. He had seen Charlie's story on television and had an amazing idea. David wanted to build a research center right on Sarah's mountain property. The center would study animal intelligence and genetics, with Charlie as the main subject. Sarah would own the land and buildings, and the research center would pay her a salary of $100,000 every year for the rest of her life. David promised that the research center would be designed to look beautiful and would not damage the mountain environment. Charlie would live in a special area designed just for him, with everything he needed to be happy and comfortable. Tourists could visit the center to learn about animal intelligence and see Charlie, and Sarah would get money from every visitor. This offer was different from all the others because it meant Sarah could stay in the mountains with Charlie while still making enough money to live comfortably forever. She would not have to move away from the home she'd grown to love, and Charlie would not have to leave the mountains either. Sarah spent many nights thinking about all these offers. She talked to Charlie about each one, even though she knew he could not really understand what money meant. But Charlie seemed to sense that important decisions were being made about their future. The hardest part was that Sarah had never expected to have choices like these. For years she had felt trapped by poverty and loneliness. Now she had opportunities that could make her wealthy and famous. It was almost too much to believe. Sarah realized that Charlie had not only saved her from being lonely and poor, but he had also given her the power to choose her own future. The tiny donkey that cost 50 cents had become her ticket to a completely different life. But Sarah was smart enough to know that money could not buy the most important thing Charlie had already given her: love and friendship. Whatever decisions she made, she wanted to make sure that Charlie would always be happy and safe. Sarah had no idea that her decisions about these offers would not only change her life, but would also create something that would help animals and people for many years to come. Her 50-cent investment was about to become the foundation of something much bigger than she had ever imagined. By 2023, Sarah's life had changed so much that sometimes she could barely remember what it felt like to worry about money for food and heating oil. She had accepted several of the offers that had been made to her, and each decision had led to even more opportunities than she had ever imagined possible. Sarah had agreed to work with David Chen to build the research center on her mountain property. The Charlie Foundation for Animal Intelligence Research was now a beautiful collection of buildings that looked like they belonged in the mountains. The main building was made of wood and stone that matched the natural surroundings. The research center had laboratories where scientists studied Charlie's genetics and behavior, but it also had comfortable spaces designed just for Charlie. He had a large indoor area with soft floors and toys, and an outdoor space with hills to climb and tunnels to explore. Charlie seemed to love his new home and enjoyed showing off for the researchers who came to study him. Sarah's old cabin had been expanded and renovated into a beautiful home. She now had central heating, a modern kitchen, and windows that did not let the cold air in during winter. But she had kept some of the old cabin exactly the way it was to remember where she had come from. The book that Sarah wrote about her life with Charlie had become a bestseller. 50 Cents to Forever, Life Lessons from a Tiny Donkey had sold over 2 million copies around the world. People loved reading about how Sarah and Charlie had found each other and changed each other's lives. Sarah had been surprised to discover that she enjoyed writing. The book publisher had helped her work with a professional writer to tell her story, but Sarah had written many parts of it herself. She found that putting her thoughts and feelings into words helped her understand her own journey better. The money from the book sales, combined with the money from the movie rights and the research agreements, had made Sarah a millionaire several times over. But more importantly, it had given her the resources to do things she had only dreamed of before. Sarah had used some of her money to help other people in her mountain community. She had paid to fix the road that led up to the cabin so that her neighbors could get to town more easily during winter. She had also helped several families repair their homes and buy better heating systems. The Charlie Foundation had brought many jobs to the area. Scientists, tour guides, gift shop workers, and maintenance staff all worked at the research center. Many of these jobs went to local people who had been struggling to find work in the mountains. The research center had become a popular destination for visitors from around the world. People came to learn about animal intelligence and to meet Charlie. The center offered educational programs for school children, college students, and families. Visitors could watch Charlie solve puzzles and see demonstrations of his amazing abilities. Charlie seemed to enjoy meeting new people every day. He had become very good at performing for crowds and seemed to understand that he was famous. But he never became too proud or difficult to handle. He was still the same gentle, intelligent donkey who loved spending quiet time with Sarah at the end of each day. The research being done at the Charlie Foundation was helping scientists understand more about how intelligence develops in animals. Charlie's unique genetics had already led to breakthroughs in understanding certain human genetic disorders. Several new medicines were being developed based on what researchers had learned from studying Charlie. Sarah had also become involved in animal rescue work. She used some of her money to help animal shelters and rescue organizations. She had a special interest in helping animals that were considered unwanted or different, just like Charlie had been. The foundation had started a program called Second Chance Animals that helped find homes for animals that were hard to place because of their size, age, or special needs. Sarah often said that if Charlie had taught her anything, it was that the most special animals are sometimes the ones that nobody else wants. Sarah's social media accounts about Charlie had millions of followers. She posted pictures and videos of Charlie every day, and people from around the world left comments about how much Charlie's story had inspired them. Many people shared their own stories of rescue animals who had changed their lives. The gift shop at the Charlie Foundation sold stuffed animals that looked like Charlie, books, calendars, and other items featuring Charlie's picture. The money from these sales helped pay for the foundation's research and educational programs. Charlie had become a brand that people recognized and loved around the world. Sarah had hired several people to help her manage all of Charlie's business affairs. She had a lawyer, an accountant, and a publicist who helped her make decisions about new opportunities. But Sarah always made the final decisions about anything that involved Charlie. One of the most rewarding parts of Sarah's new life was the letters and emails she received from people around the world. Children wrote to tell her that Charlie's story had inspired them to be kind to animals. Adults wrote to share their own stories of how they had overcome difficult times. Many people told Sarah that Charlie's story had given them hope when they were feeling hopeless. Some people said that reading about how Sarah's life had changed had helped them believe that their own lives could get better too. Sarah had also started speaking at conferences and events about animal welfare and the importance of giving unwanted animals a chance. She was not a natural public speaker at first, but she had learned to share Charlie's story in a way that moved and inspired audiences. The transformation of Sarah's life was almost unbelievable. She had gone from living alone in a cold cabin with barely enough money for food to being the owner of a multi-million-dollar research foundation. She had written a best-selling book, appeared on television shows around the world, and become a recognized expert on animal intelligence. But perhaps the most amazing part of Sarah's transformation was that she had never forgotten where she came from or lost sight of what was truly important. She still woke up every morning and spent time with Charlie and Rusty. She still felt grateful every day for the 50-cent purchase that had changed everything. Sarah knew that her story was far from over. Charlie was still young and healthy, and the research foundation was growing every year. There would be more discoveries, more opportunities, and more ways to help animals and people around the world. The poor mountain woman who had bought a tiny donkey for 50 cents had built an empire based on love, hope, and the belief that every life has value. And it had all started with a little donkey that nobody else wanted. 4 years after Sarah had raised her hand at the animal sale and bought Charlie for 50 cents, she stood on the deck of her beautiful mountain home and watched the sunrise paint the peaks gold and pink. It was a sight she had seen thousands of times, but now she could enjoy it without the worry and fear that had once filled her mornings. Charlie was playing in his custom playground, designed by experts to challenge his intelligence and keep him happy. The playground had puzzles, climbing structures, and tunnels that could be rearranged to create new challenges. Charlie loved solving the puzzles, and the researchers at the foundation used his playtime to study how his remarkable mind worked. Sarah could hardly believe how much her life had changed. She was now worth several $1,000,000, but more importantly, she had found a purpose that filled her with joy every single day. The Charlie Foundation had grown into one of the most respected animal research centers in the world. The research being done at the foundation had led to amazing discoveries. Charlie's unique genetics had helped scientists understand how certain genes affect intelligence in both animals and humans. This research was being used to develop new treatments for children with learning disabilities and genetic disorders that affect the brain. 3 new medicines had been developed based on research that started with studying Charlie's genes. These medicines were helping thousands of children and adults around the world live better lives. Sarah felt proud knowing that Charlie was not just entertaining people, but actually helping to heal them. The foundation had also become a leader in animal welfare education. Over 100,000 people visited the center each year to learn about animal intelligence and the importance of treating all animals with kindness and respect. Many visitors left the center with a new understanding of how smart and sensitive animals can be. Sarah had used her wealth to create scholarship programs for young people from poor rural areas like the one she had grown up in. She knew what it felt like to have dreams but no money to make them come true. The Charlie Foundation scholarships had helped over 500 students go to college and pursue careers in science, veterinary medicine, and animal care. The foundation had also funded conservation programs that protected mountain habitats and the wild animals that lived in them. Sarah had never forgotten her love for the mountains that had been her refuge during her darkest times. Now she had the power to help protect these special places for future generations. Charlie's story had been told in dozens of languages and had inspired people all over the world. His biography had been translated into 30 languages, and the movie about his life had been watched by millions of people in theaters and on television. Charlie had become a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt unwanted or unlucky. Sarah received hundreds of letters every month from people who said that Charlie's story had changed their lives. Teachers used his story to teach children about kindness and perseverance. Therapists shared his story with patients who were struggling with depression or feeling hopeless about their futures. One letter that particularly touched Sarah came from a young girl named Maria, who lived in a poor family in Mexico. Maria wrote that she had been sad because other children made fun of her for being different. But after hearing Charlie's story, she realized that being different could be a gift, not a problem. Maria was now studying hard in school because she wanted to become a veterinarian and help animals like Charlie. Sarah had also started a program called Every Animal Matters that helped animal shelters around the world find homes for animals that were considered hard to adopt. The program had helped find homes for over 10,000 animals that might otherwise have been put to sleep. The program focused especially on older animals, disabled animals, and animals that were considered too small, too big, or too unusual for most people to want. Sarah often said that these animals were the most special because they had to overcome more challenges, just like Charlie had done. As Sarah reflected on her journey, she realized that the most important lesson she had learned was about the power of love and hope. When she had bought Charlie for 50 cents, she had not been thinking about making money or becoming famous. She had simply felt sorry for a small, unwanted animal and had wanted to give him a chance at a better life. That simple act of kindness had grown into something much bigger than Sarah had ever imagined possible. It had not only changed her life and Charlie's life, but it had also touched the lives of millions of people around the world. Sarah had learned that wealth was not just about having money in the bank. Real wealth came from having meaningful relationships, doing work that mattered, and knowing that your life had made the world a little bit better. She had all of these things now, and it had all started with 50 cents and a heart full of compassion. Charlie was now 8 years old and still as healthy and intelligent as ever. The veterinarians who cared for him said he could live for many more years. Sarah looked forward to growing old with her beloved companion and continuing the work they had started together. Sarah had also found love again. She had married Dr. Rodriguez, who had become not just a research partner but also a life partner. Together, they were planning to expand the foundation's work and help even more animals and people in the years to come. Every morning, Sarah still spent quiet time with Charlie, just the two of them like in the old days in the cabin. She would tell him about her plans for the day and her dreams for the future. Charlie would listen with the same intelligent eyes that had captured her heart years ago. Sometimes Sarah thought about what would have happened if she had not raised her hand at that animal sale. Charlie might have been sent back to wherever he came from, and neither of their lives would have turned out the way they did. It reminded her that small decisions could have huge consequences, and that kindness was never wasted. As Sarah watched Charlie play in his special playground, surrounded by the beautiful research center that bore his name, she felt grateful for every step of their journey together. The struggles in her old cabin, the excitement of Charlie's first achievements, the craziness of becoming famous, and the satisfaction of building something meaningful, all of it had been worth it. Sarah often told people that she had bought Charlie for 50 cents, but Charlie had given her a life worth millions. He had taught her that every creature, no matter how small or unwanted, had value and potential. He had shown her that love and patience could overcome any obstacle. The mountain woman who had once worried about buying food now helped feed hungry children around the world. The lonely woman who had only her old dog for company now had thousands of friends and supporters. The woman who had felt hopeless about her future now spent her days creating hope for others. And it had all started with 50 cents and a tiny donkey that nobody else wanted. Charlie had not just made Sarah a millionaire. He had made her rich in all the ways that truly mattered.